this very important book, The Silencing of a Laotian Son, written by Shui-Ming. This is a heart's work, something that she has, poured her heart into. These books are available in the back, can be purchased for $10 or 320 baht. And Shui-Ming will be signing books after the press conference. So please do get a book and have her sign that afterwards. I would just say that 9 years on, the situation doesn't feel any better. It still hurts as much. And we've got a very important group of people here to talk about the situation, not only about Sombath, Somphone's enforced disappearance, but also about the situation in Laos. And I want to introduce our first speaker, which will be Cynthia Veliko. She has served with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights since 2006 as a human rights advisor in 3 countries, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines, and was appointed in August 2017 as the representative to OHCHR's regional office to Southeast Asia, based here in Bangkok. Prior to joining OHCHR, she worked on polio eradication for WHO, and has also worked with governments, UN country teams, and others in Asia and Africa. And she began her work with the UN back in 1999 with the Department of Political Affairs. So, Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Phil, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. I am very pleased to be here with you today, and I would like to particularly thank Shui-Ming for the invitation to participate in this event that marks the 9th anniversary of Sombath's disappearance in Lao PDR, and to speak about the persisting crime of enforced disappearance in Southeast Asia. An enforced disappearance is defined as an arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state or by persons or groups of persons acting with the authorization, support, acquiescence of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or by the concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the disappeared persons, placing them outside the protection of the law. The Convention on Enforced Disappearances provides that no one shall be subject to such an action without exception, even in times of war, and it provides that it would constitute a crime against humanity when practiced in a widespread or systematic manner. The enforced disappearance of a person violates a range of human rights embodied in the UN Declaration of Human Rights and set out in international instruments and law, including the 1992 Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, and subsequently the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. The convention was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2006 with the specific aim to strengthen the international criminal and human rights framework that governs and protects individuals from this heinous and cowardly act. The victims of enforced disappearance, having been removed from the protection of the law and disappeared from society, are in fact deprived of all of their basic rights, amongst others, the right to life, liberty, and security of person, the right not to be subjected to torture, and the right to recognition as a person before the law. At the same time, an enforced disappearance by its very nature takes an extreme emotional toll on the families of the victims who remain unaware of the fate of their loved ones, searching for answers and waiting for news that often never comes. For this very reason, and recognizing the unique and severe psychological, physical, and too often financial strain that is imposed on family members of disappeared persons, Article 24 of the Convention includes in the definition of victim not just the disappeared person, but also any individual who has suffered harm as a direct result from the enforced disappearance, notably family members. Enforced disappearances are sadly a regular global phenomenon. In Southeast Asia, this practice has traditionally been used by states as a means of silencing political opponents or critical voices. Individuals have been targeted for exercising their fundamental right to freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. Victims have included human rights defenders, environmental, social, and political activists, government critics, lawyers, and journalists. In addition, over the past decade, there is a deeply worrisome trend in relation to the number of enforced disappearances that are occurring in the context of counterterrorism activities, as well as what are so-called wars on drugs. Indeed, enforced disappearances have frequently been used to spread fear and send strong messages to other individuals who are courageously raising their voices on critical issues of public interest and concern. The feeling of insecurity that is generated by this act is not limited to the close relatives of the disappeared, but also affects communities and societies as a whole. OHCHR also notes with great concern that far too many cases of enforced disappearances in the region remain unresolved, such as for Sombath. States in the region have yet to adopt domestic legislation that meets international standards, nor have there been appropriate domestic institutional mechanisms established to ensure transparent and effective investigations into these cases. Furthermore, only one country in the region, Cambodia, has ratified the convention. Laos PDR, Indonesia, and Thailand have signed but have not yet ratified. While not legally binding at that stage, when a country signs a treaty, they have signaled legally their willingness and established an expectation that they will act in compliance with the spirit of its provisions and would refrain from any actions that may defeat the object and purpose of the treaty prior to its entry into force. The lack of treaty ratification or relevant criminal domestic legislation and an overall absence of political will to address acts of enforced disappearance have resulted in long-standing and widespread impunity for perpetrators of enforced disappearances that grossly undermine the ability of victims to obtain truth, justice, and to seek reparations. I would like to take this opportunity to remember Sombath, a prominent, well-respected development worker and human rights defender from Laos, who went missing on 15 December 2012 in Vientiane after being stopped at a police checkpoint, and whose whereabouts thereafter remain unknown. OHCHR, as well as the special procedures of the UN Human Rights Council, in particular the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances, have continuously and regularly engaged over the past 9 years with the government of Laos PDR. However, there have been absolutely no progress whatsoever in the investigation into the case, leaving the family without Sombath and the possibility for truth, justice, and redress. International law requires that states launch immediate, thorough, and impartial investigations that are in line with international legal standards to determine the fate and whereabouts of those who have been disappeared, and to bring perpetrators to justice. With the lowest ratification record in the world, it is critical that governments of Asia ratify the International Convention and establish a strong domestic legal framework that incorporates all provisions of the Convention. There should be no further delays in making this a criminal offense in every country, together with legal standards that ensure full disclosure, transparency, and accountability for all persons deprived of their liberty. Let me conclude by saying that as the international community's attention focuses on implementing the 2030 Agenda, it is important that the ratification and full implementation of the Convention, as well as other relevant treaties, be considered essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. This applies particularly to SDG 16 in promoting the rule of law, ensuring equal access to justice, ending impunity, protecting human rights, and sustaining peace in achieving the central tenet of the 2030 Agenda of leaving no one behind. Let me conclude by saying how deeply I was touched, Shui-Ming, as I read your memoirs of Sombath, his commitment to family, friends, his country, and his work to make our world a better place for all. Thank you for sharing with all of us this beautiful and inspirational life story. Thank you again for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Next, we're going to hear from Ajaan Sulak Sivaraksa. He is a regional and world-renowned social activist, professor, intellectual, and writer. He's initiated a number of social, humanitarian, ecological, and spiritual movements and organizations in Thailand, such as the College, SEM, Spirit and Education Movement. And he's also the co-founder of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. So, Ajahn Sulak, the floor is yours.
I will be brief because I know Sombath very well indeed, and he is a unique person. What his wife wrote about him, she toned it down, but she's much more significant than is written here. Because for me, for a Laotian to return to the country under communist control, he was the only one. Most of them left the country seeking refuge elsewhere. And when he returned to Laos, he dedicated his life for the benefit of his people, for his country, and not only for his country, for all this area. I have the opportunity to travel with him to quite a few countries, apart from in Laos itself. We went to Bhutan together, we went to Burma together, and indeed, the last night we had dinner together was in Mandalay. And next day, we all came back to Bangkok, and from Bangkok he went to Laos. And I think soon after that he disappeared. However, I believe that the Laotian government would not kill him. And for those journalists attending this session, I sincerely beg you to write something to encourage the Laotian government rather than condemning them. Because the Laotian power that be, despite being communist, they are still very gentle. And they don't want to lose faith. They don't know how to release him without losing faith. There is also a struggle between the party and the army. I can assure you that he is still alive. Because I have a friend, a Laotian friend, who was my classmate at the Assumption College in Bangkok. His father was the chief Chao Phraya, the highest ranking of the regime under the king. He himself was the personal aide-de-camp to the king. He, of course, he disappeared after the communists take over with the king and the crown prince and the rest. And people thought he dead. His wife remarried. But after 20 years, he turned up. I met him personally in Laos. So that's why I'm not only hope, I am sure Sombath is still alive. And I hope they don't treat him too badly. Because comparing with the Lao government and the Thai government, I think the Laos government are much more gentle than the Thai or the Khmer. I think as I speak in this country, some of you may know that I also have been treated very badly by the Thai government, the Thai junta. And now in Cambodia, quite a number of refugees come to my place at the ashram. More than 50 people fleeing from the Khmer government. Just in short, I just hope that with this, launching this book, and those who want to write about it, please use your tact and make the Laotian government that they are kind people, gentle people, and I hope soon Sombath will return to us all. And if you want to hear more from the author of this book, let me advertise on the 13th of February, she will give a public lecture in Bangkok. If you're interested, I will leave my card. You can contact me, the place where it would be taking place, and I'm sure she will have more to tell you. And with that, I just end my brief introduction. I hope that we have more time opening dialogue from the audience and from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Sulak. Yes, we will certainly have a time for question and answer at the end of this session. Next, I want to turn to Ankana Nilapajit. She was born in a Muslim family in Bangkok, Thailand. She is a graduate of the Faculty of Nursing in Mahidol University, and became a human rights activist after her husband, who was a prominent human rights lawyer, was kidnapped by a group of police officers and disappeared on 12 March 2004. She is currently the founder and chairwoman of the Justice for Peace Foundation, and has won innumerable human rights awards, which are probably too many to list here. Most recently, however, I would say that she was awarded the Magsaysay Award in 2019, which is considered the sort of Southeast Asian Nobel Prize. Kunankana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bill. And good morning, everyone, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends. And my special thanks to Shu-Ming for having me to join this very important moment. I remember very well when, in early 2013, when I first met Shu-Ming in Bangkok, I can feel that she's very kind and humble. She's very impressive to me, and she always optimist. She firmly believed that Sombath is still alive, and one day he shall return to his family. And until now, nobody can change her mind and breaking her hope. Thailand is similar to many countries in Asia that enforce disappearance and can happen anytime and any places. And as this is a crime committed by state officers, so it made the life of victims and their family more complicated, scary, and insecure, especially the marginalized and vulnerable people. For family, our life was totally changed after our loved one disappeared. And but when life was changed, it cannot return to normal. Only thing you can do is you have to move on, even though you cannot see the better future. My husband, a human rights lawyer, was abducted by police in 2004, and until now, his fate and whereabouts remain unknown. Before his disappearance, I'm a professional nurse, as Phil mentioned earlier, and I'm also a mother of 5. This tragedy made me to face so many kinds of stress and intimidations. But I have to struggle to survive, not only for myself, but also for my family. I would say that it is hard to imagine how immense the impact caused by enforced disappearance on the victims themselves, their communities, and their societies, as well as the impact on economic, social, and cultural rights. In addition, enforced disappearance is the creation of ambiguity in between existence and non-existence. It has made the traumas as inflicted that more complicated and aggravated than other kinds of human rights violation. It has even caused tremendous fear among families of the victims. It does not only render wounds on the body of the victims, but also crush the victim's soundness and degrade his or her human dignity and identity directly and indirectly, especially for the secondary victims, for example, his or her family and society. The families, especially children of the victims, as a result, have to live with traumas and deep pain for long life. After I became a survivor, I tried to support other victims. I found a small organization called Justice for Peace Foundation. The organization has aimed to promote and protect human rights, especially torture and enforced disappearances, fighting to end impunity and inequality in Thailand and in Asia. And because of trust from the families of the disappeared, I became a critical voice for the victims, and I passionately dedicated and keep advocating on behalf of victims and representing the most marginalized community in the region. GPF have a lot of activities to empower victims' families. We have published the first report on situation of enforced disappearance in Thailand in 2012. The report opened the stories and showing the faces of many victims of enforced disappearance in Thailand. And it brought the issue of enforced disappearance to national and international attention. JPF also worked very closely with UN Working Group on enforced or involuntary disappearance, and we lobbied and encouraging the Thai government to ratify the convention and pass the organic law on torture and enforced disappearance act that now under the consideration of the House of Representatives. The challenging is how the members of parliament should adopt the draft law that complies with the international convention. Shu-Ming is one of the survivors who sharing her thoughts through this book launching today, and I'm very happy and sincerely congratulate for her dedication, not only for Sombath Somphone, but for all innocent people that are victims of enforced disappearance. In her book, Shu-Ming explained how important we should protect our person from this state crime. Regarding to this book, as a Laotian son and the son of the poor farmer growing up in the 60s, Sombath experiences and witnessed the impact on the lives of the poor and powerless people like himself and his family. Sombath spent much of his adult life analyzing and underlying causes of poverty and well-being of the people that must be built upon a strong foundation of just and sustained well-being and secure and safe livelihoods for all. A new vision for his education and emphasis on the balance between material and spiritual well-being and a system of governance that is based on the rule of law and respect the rights of all. As a victim, I totally understand how difficult to continue the life of family members who were left behind. Every anniversary, of our loved one who disappeared. It reminds us about justice in our society. Most families want to know the truth, as truth will release us from ambiguity, and truth that can heal the scar in our heart and turn it to strengthen our life to struggle to end this kind of crime against humanity. Some might say that the struggle of Shu-Ming or myself may be a role model for others victims' family. I would say that one easily thing we often do is we never stop our voices speaking the right things. We never stop speaking what has happened, that not only for our families, but for all. And for us, no matter how the stories of Sombath, Somphone, or Ankana Nilapajit, or other victims of enforced disappearance will end, I do believe that one day the truth will be revealed. The offenders will have nowhere to hide, and justice will be restored. For victim families, there's some traumatized memories that still buried in our heart. Although it is painful, but it always reminds us what has happened, and whether happy or sad, it's a memory that we want to keep. This memory is telling us again and again that whether how traumatized we have, but life can be healed, repaired, corrected, to become strong again by ourselves, to continue our struggle to stop disappearance and to end impunity. On this 9th anniversary of the disappearance of Sombath, Somphone, I stand in solidarity and in unity with Shu-Ming and Sombath family. I stand in solidarity with her relentless, untiring struggle to get truth and justice. I also stand in unity with her pain, a pain that no wife should ever have to bear, and to have their loved one torn away from them in such an ignoble manner. I also stand in unity with her anger of the impunity of the system of injustice, and I stand with her that in one day the truth will come and Sombath shall return. On this day, with pain, Shu-Ming telling us the stories of Sombath, Somphone, and how he dedicated his life for his respective country and his beloved people through this book. And I believe as Shu-Ming that our loved one always be with us. And as is wrote in her book, in the front page by Anonymous, I quote, "Those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always near, still love it, still miss it, and very dear." I thank you very much.
Thank you, Kun Ankana, for that very heartfelt statement of solidarity and support. Now we're going to hear from Shui-Ming. She's a Singapore national. She's also the wife of Sombath, Somphone. In 1986, she left her home in Singapore and moved to join her husband, Sombath, in Laos. After that, she worked mainly in the development field with several development agencies focusing on women's development and improvement of livelihoods. In 2012, her husband, Sombath, Somphone, who was a respected and well-known development leader, was disappeared in Vientiane, right in front of a police post. In fact, the entire sequence of Sombath, Somphone's abduction was recorded by the Lao police CCTV, which Shui-Ming was able to obtain. Since her husband's disappearance, she's mounted a relentless campaign, both inside and outside Laos, to get Sombath, Somphone released and returned safely to her and her family. She's made countless appeals to the Lao government authorities to investigate the case and to find her husband. But to date, she's only really met a blank wall. She's also traversed the globe to seek international support to find answers on what happened to her husband. And it's now 9 years since Sombath disappeared, and she still has no answers. To ensure that the despicable crime against her husband will not be forgotten, she has written the book Silencing of a Laotian Son, The Life, Work, and Enforced Disappearance of Sombath Somphone, as a way to ensure that the life and legacy of Sombath live on. Shu-Ming, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. And thank you for coming out today to be here with us. Most importantly, I really want to thank the panel of speakers, Ajahn Sulak, Ankana, and Cynthia. They are dear friends, supporters, and have been with me over many years, walking this journey with me and giving me encouragement. So I'm really, really thankful for them, and also thankful for their sharing and encouragement, especially to reassurance to me that Sombath is still alive. I keep it in my heart, and this is why in the book I say I write in the present tense. Because until I hear that Sombath is no longer here, I will continue to think and believe he's alive. Tomorrow, 15th December, is the 9th anniversary of Sombath's disappearance. And over the last 9 years, it has been, like Ankana has described, a fellow victim. It has been a very traumatic journey. So some of you may ask, or some friends have even asked me, why write the book? Why relive the trauma? I also often wonder. When I started writing the book, I asked myself the same question. Why do I want to relive the moments of what happened? But as Ankana herself very well knows, our trauma, our wound, is always with us. It's only temporary and momentarily covered by the scab of time. Scrape it, and the wound and the oozing pain is there. It will never go away. So I decided that I must record the life, the work of Sombath. It is to validate his life, that he walked this earth. He is a human being like you and I. He too have parents who gave birth to him, raised him, loved him, and nurtured him. He has a right. His memories of what he did, what he achieved, these memories can never be disappeared. The perpetrators who so heartlessly tore him from the bosom of his family want us to forget. They want to disappear him and his memories to be forever erased from the surface of the earth. I can't let that happen. I can't let something a human being who has dedicated his life to his community, his society, and his only wish, I have also mentioned in the book, quoted from what he said and left behind in his writings. He said that his only hope and wish is to give back to society what he has received, the education that he got, the love of his family and his community. And he said, giving back is a pleasure. I cannot let this life of this man go. So in writing this book, it is my way of showing my love for Sombath. I honor him, I validate him. I share with you some of our memories, but most importantly, I want to share with you how he grew up in Laos as the son of a poor farmer. Like more than 85% of how Lao people grow up in their own families. Making a living, making an honest living, mostly tilling the soil, fishing in the waters, putting food on the table, sharing their happiness with whatever meager little things that they find to build a life. And all these lives have meaning. All these lives have value. We should not think that memories are important only about the powerful or those who have discovered wonderful discoveries. No. Memories of ordinary men and women are those who write the history of their family, their community, and the society. Without these collective memories, actually we have no history. Our history, our human history, is the collective memories of all these ordinary men and women who toil on this earth, who work for the betterment of their families, who try to do their little bit to make their ordinary lives make sense to them. So, I would like to just quote the saying of a Holocaust survivor. Elie Wiesel, the famous Nobel Prize winner, who had written in his memoir, famous memoir called Night. And I have often gone back to read him to remind myself that survivors have stories to tell. He said, for in the end, it is all about memory, its sources and its magnitude, and of course, its consequences. For the survivor who chooses to testify, it is clear his duty is to bear witness for the dead and for the living. He has no right to deprive future generations of a past that belongs to our collective memory. To forget would not only be dangerous, but offensive. I must also say, writing the book has not been easy. It has been an emotional roller coaster. And in my mind, over the last 9 years, I must have written many versions of the story. But only now that I have put it in words. And strangely enough, it is during the COVID lockdown, when I have nothing to do. We are sitting at home, I have no more excuses to give myself that I must do this or that. And frankly, there is only so much Netflix you can watch. So I sat down in front of the computer. Nowadays, we don't write on paper. And I don't know how many times I have started, erased, so many different versions. But in my mind, I know it has to come out. And I'm thankful to the people who encouraged me to go on. I'm particularly thankful for Ted here, who has helped me to edit the book, and also to Melissa Storm, a colleague of Ted, who is now in Phuket. She too, they have spent enormous hours, numbers of hours with me, trying to understand what I'm trying to say, you know, to make sure that everything comes up clearly, clarify my own thoughts, and now we have this book. So this book is dedicated to all victims of enforced disappearance. It's not only for me and for Sombath, but it is for the Sombaths and the Somjais of the world. People, ordinary people, who were just taken away from their families. But they continue to live in our hearts. We, Ankana, I, and many others, survivors, we have tried to be the voice of the countless voiceless victims of enforced disappearance, who for many reasons have not been able to tell their stories. I hope you will read the story, share the book with your friends and networks, and make sure that our memories go on. So as Ankana closed, I too would like to once more repeat this anonymous poem which I have used at the beginning and at the close of the book. Those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day, unseen, unheard, but always near, still loved, still missed, and very dear. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's hard to know really what to say. I mean, it's so wrenching. We will continue to fight to find out what happened to Sombath. Human Rights Watch and many other organizations are still demanding answers from the Lao government, and we will continue to do so. Tomorrow, actually, we're going to be releasing a statement again on the anniversary of Sombath's disappearance, and representatives of NGOs who are here who want to sign on to that statement, please get in touch with me after the event, and I'm happy to help with that. We're going to open the floor for discussion. If people have questions, that would be great. I mean, since technically this is a press conference, so if there are working members of the media who wish to get up and ask questions, you have the first priority here. Others, of course, are also welcome to share their thoughts and ideas. Please introduce yourself, include your affiliation, if any, and make sure you tell us who you're directing your questions to. So the floor is open. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you all, especially for the very moving and powerful statements. I'm Gwen Robinson, former president of the Foreign Correspondents Club and editor-at-large of Nikkei Asia. I'm just curious, I'd like to ask Ajahn Sulak, You said that Laos is kind of gentler than some of the other countries of the region, which is coming off an extremely low base. But it seems to have a far more insidious culture of repression. And I'd just like to ask if you could elaborate on what you know of Laos and how it works, and also the rest of the panelists to really give us... We don't... In Thailand, I think so much focus is on the Thai system and authorities and repression here, and then obviously Cambodia and Myanmar steal all the headlines. We don't know so much about Laos, and the Sombath case was truly shocking and threw some little spotlight. But the way I think authorities in the immediate aftermath of his disappearance stonewalled everybody, including, you know, other governments and international organisations, would suggest there's far more problems in Laos than really meet the eye. Thank you.
No, she's getting it.
I only speak from my personal experiences, and if I may claim I know Laos quite well, we also have activities with the Sangha in Laos. Despite the fact that it is a communist country, and I work closely with the Sangha in Laos much more so than in this country, because the Sangha in this country is gone more and more capitalistic, whereas the Laotian Sangha try to be themselves. And I know not only the Sangha, I know quite a number of people, include some in the government, even those on the cabinet level. But unfortunately, even those in the cabinet level have no real power, because power lies only with the Communist Party and the army. I may be wrong, but I think that my personal experience with Laos and my personal experience with Cambodia is entirely different. In my small organization right now, we have almost 100 refugees from Cambodia, and some of them who flee to this country. Hun Sen sent people to kill the people in this country, unfortunately, with the collaboration with the hideous Thai junta. Burma, of course, is much more vicious. And I understand, because the Burmese are minority in their country. They distrust the Mon, the Kachin, the Karen, and so on. This is just my personal experience about Laotian people, and even those in the power that be.
Would anybody else like to comment about the sort of the way that Laos works?
I think Ajahn Sulak is right, in the sense that if you live in Laos, and I've lived in Laos for so many years, I have friends here who have also, some of you have also lived in Laos, worked in Laos. Laos don't, although it's a communist country, we know that there are, underground cells in every community, every village who will report on our activities. But you don't see the same kind of violence that you hear of, where police will come out and shoot and kill. I think partly you don't see that kind of violence because, yes, majority of the Lao people are very gentle, and they try to avoid any open confrontation and open disagreements. Of course, below it is all there. But also, Ajahn Sulak has put his finger rightly on one point, is that Actually, if you look at the leadership, people have been engaging with Prime Minister, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, talking to this minister and that ministers. Actually, many of the government ministers have no power. They don't make decisions. They only implement decisions. The decisions are made by the Politburo, a small number of men and one woman in the Politburo. Many of them are from the military. The key senior people are the military. And the decisions are often made on the basis of security, keeping Laos safe. And all it needs is one of the generals, and the president is always a military person, sitting on top of the Communist Party. All that small group of generals, 2 or 3 of them, all they have to say is that so-and-so is a troublemaker. So-and-so is undermining the security of the state. They don't need to show evidence. All they need to do is to tell people we should keep the state safe, to keep peace, get rid of these people, and they will be removed. Either disappeared or with trump-up charges, put in jail. And because of the gentle nature of the Lao people, who are always afraid of getting into trouble, will keep quiet. Family members will not say anything. They will not challenge the state. Even members of my own family. I'm the face of protest. I'm the face of what happened to Sombath, because I'm a Singaporean. I am a Singapore citizen. I am not a Laos citizen. I don't have a Lao passport. They allow me to stay there and give me a visa, a long-term visa, because I have a small business there, so I'm staying there on a business visa. They can throw me out anytime, any day, but they chose not to. Probably they don't want to make a big row. But nobody in my family will openly challenge the state. This is why it is so easy to kind of have this sense of peace, sense of non-violence in Laos, because the people are compliant. The people were not challenged. And to some extent, and actually I say this, and that we have some diplomats here also, even the diplomatic community, because they want to work in Laos, they also want to make sure that they don't get into trouble. They try not to raise the issue openly. There are human rights dialogue. They're behind the scene, they're helping. I know, they tell me what they're doing. We have asked this, we have asked that, we're trying to get answer. But they will never openly challenge the state. And this has become the practice. So inside Laos, nobody talks about Sombath. Nobody. It's only outside. This is why we need the international pressure to continue.
It doesn't directly answer the question that you asked, but I think it is important to mention that there have been other registered cases of disappearances since Sombath who are Lao nationals, and one of which was Od Sayavong, who went missing here in Thailand. He was a Lao refugee living in Thailand. And in August 2019, he disappeared from Bangkok. And has not been seen again. He was a refugee, as I said. He was also an activist who was quite critical of the government of Lao PDR. So I think it's important to note that there have been others that have been registered as officially disappeared with the Working Group on Enforced Disappearance. And these cases are important for us not to forget, in addition to the others that we see. We see a situation of a cross-border potential disappearance, and this is something that is a growing concern in the region over the last years. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, it's Ponpen Pongkajankiat from the Cross Cultural Foundation. I just wanted to remind the forums that 13th of December, 3 years ago, there was the Thai refugee in Laos was also reported that 2 bodies found along the Mekong River and 1 body is still missing. So I would like to add on the regional cooperation in relation to returning opponents of each other in our regions. It's alarming that it has been happening for continuous at least 2-3 years between countries in Indochina, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And we have consistently getting the threat and intimidation by the police in the country, and of course maybe in other neighboring countries as well. I just would like to ask any regional cooperation that maybe we can stop this threat and intimidation against opponents in the regions, that we can respect their right as non-refoulement and also refugee rights in the country like Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Maybe if I can just start. It's an important question, and it was what I had mentioned in my last comment on the extraterritorial nature of some of what we're seeing in the region, which is very disturbing. I think there are a number of things that we in the international community certainly need to do on this issue. I mean, the first is really around advocating for ratification of this convention. Now, while it doesn't resolve the problem necessarily, it is a legally binding instrument that is to hold governments to account for actions of that nature. I think the other part of this is that, and this is what is very sad, we know of other cases of enforced disappearances that we can't speak about officially because family members are too scared to even register these cases with the UN bodies. They fear reprisals, which are real in their countries, and know that both for themselves and their family members, they could be at indirect risk of one violation or another should they report it. This, of course, makes speaking openly and exposing these kinds of violations extremely difficult. And I think it's incumbent on all of us, and this is, I wanted to reiterate what Shui-Ming said. I am extremely disappointed when I see at bodies such as the UPR and others that other member states who allegedly champion certain rights no longer speak so openly or so forcefully about these issues that are taking place. And they are operating in countries where this happens, and they are not being accountable for those same rights that they indicate that they stand for. And it needs to be something that is openly discussed as a problem, and it needs to be part of a regular and routine dialogue with partners who are also benefiting from trade agreements and other things being present in country. Thank you.
Brothers, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to have some comments on these issues. I think trans-border disappearance is one of the major concerns during this couple of years. About the 2 Thai political activists that migrate to Laos, and after that we found 2 of them dead in the Mekong River. For the investigation of the police, the police found a lot of evidence that some of the concrete in the abnormal is not from Thailand, but it's from neighboring countries. But the police cannot investigate more than that because they have no cooperation among ASEAN for serious human rights violation. I also disappoint the role of the human rights mechanism. For example, the CNF, the Southeast Asian Forum on National Human Rights Institution. I think at least the National Human Rights Institution in ASEAN should cooperate to investigate the extraterritorial violations or trans-border violations. But they have, they have no investigation. So it's still in Miracle where is Surajai Sadan, who still a missing person. And his wife is very active. He always asking the question, and many outside authorities denied it to investigate, even the Office of the Attorney General. So it is, I think it's very challenging to the region. The ASEAN mechanism on human rights institution also, that what we have to do about the extraterritorial violations.
If I could just add also ICHR to that group of bodies that are expected to be dealing with human rights issues, real human rights issues in the region, they should also be looking into matters about extraterritorial disappearances that involve states of ASEAN.
Yeah. I'm going to take off my moderator's hat and just say that this, what we call the swap mart, where the Thai government is doing deals with neighboring countries to send people back into harm's way. We've had 3 refugees, Cambodian UNHCR recognized Cambodian refugees sent back in the last month. A 4th was narrowly averted. He's now gone to a 3rd country safely. But I mean, it's quite clear that there are agreements going on now where the space for refugees and asylum seekers who had traditionally fled to Thailand is now diminishing and all but gone. And it's also quite clear that when disappearances like Ot Sayavong's disappearance in Thailand takes place, that's not something that can happen without the Thai authorities knowing about it. Cambodian officials, Lao officials, others who come into Thailand can't operate without the knowledge of the Thai authorities. So, there's a sort of a dirty game going on here. It reminds me a little bit of what happened back in the 1980s in Latin America, where you had different governments cooperating to chase down and round up dissidents and send them back, the so-called Operation Condor, where people were being sent back to military governments, and in those cases a number of people were executed. So how is this necessarily different? How is this any different from those dark days in Latin America? It is a very serious situation, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed starting in Bangkok.
And perhaps just to say, while many of these governments have not actually ratified the Refugee Convention, they have ratified ICCPR, which very clearly articulates that there can be no refoulement of persons who are at risk or of concern for issues related to persecution or imminent threat to their lives. So I think, while we know that they haven't actually ratified the Convention on Refugees, they have on the ICCPR, and that's what we need to discuss with them when we're talking at that level of dialogue with member states.
The floor is open if anybody else would like to make a comment or ask a question. I was going to actually ask one question, which is, I was rereading the other day the report of Special Rapporteur Philip Alston about Laos, which, when he was the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, which was a report that surprised the Lao government in a very significant way. But he and others have continually spoken about a culture of fear in Laos. And I wanted to ask Shui-Ming and others to sort of talk about that culture of fear and what it means for the day-to-day lives of people in Laos, but also what it means for efforts like yours to try to find out what happened to Sombath.
I already spoke a little bit about the fear inside the country, that people don't want to talk about Sombath. His friends, people who worked with him, even some members of my family and relatives, they don't try to talk about it. And unfortunately, and this is maybe Ajahn can help me out, it's also part of this underlying Buddhist culture about let it be, acceptance. I have also become and studied, and Sombath is really studied Buddhism, and especially working in the area of Engaged Buddhism with the mentorship of people like Ajahn Sulak. I think the general public understanding of Buddhism is very superficial. So this idea about, okay, we accept, it's karma or whatever, and then they say, okay, let's try and just let go. I think they don't understand the deeper message of what acceptance and letting go really mean. I always say compassion is at the root of Buddhism. I can forgive, but I cannot forget. And we have to work constantly. As a Buddhist, if you believe in real Buddhism, we have to keep getting everybody to become better. Not only human beings, but with every living being, man and nature, together. So, but the Lao people have this very superficial understanding about Buddhism. Oh, it's his karma. It's Sombath's karma. And then they point to the fact that there was some senior level at military level, and a few years ago, a plane ran down and killed the Minister of Public Security and his wife, and also the then Minister of Defense. And they say, okay, Sombath's issue is cleared. They have already paid for their crime. This is the kind of justification that people use, and also help to reinforce the culture, not only of fear, but of silence. Accept it, at least to them, an explanation of how we get on with our lives. I think this is where I think Ajahn Sulak is right, that I believe Sombath has not been killed, because Sombath is so well known in Lao society. He has many friends. People know what he's doing. And people in Laos do not see Sombath as a troublemaker or an activist. They know him to be a diligent agronomist, educator, and working for the benefit of the community. I think Sombath was taken to send a message to other young, budding social activists who was quite active at the time Sombath was taken, forming little groups, trying to organize and raise issues. I think Sombath was taken to be a message to the other Lao. And it worked. It worked because since the disappearance of Sombath, the social activism, small, very small scale compared to what's happening in terms of social activism and social groups working on various issues. That has died completely. Zip, nothing anymore. So, the Lao authorities, or those who have made the decision to take Sombath, they are extremely smart about who to target and who not to. A few years ago, they took a young woman who used social media to talk about, the aid which went to the district, which was the dam collapse and flooded many people out, and the aid amount of big donor money going in has not reached the people. And she's sentenced to 14 years jail, languishing in jail today, and nobody talks about her. People have tried to get their parents to say something, and the parents say no. We don't want to get into more trouble for our other kids.
Please go ahead. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the sharing. My name is Spencer Leung. I'm representing the Rotary Peace Fellowship's Alumni Associations. I'm from Hong Kong. I got two questions in here. One probably directly to Cynthia. And I heard from Shu-Ming about within the states, national security is number one priority. And in Hong Kong right now, we just passed the national securities in Hong Kong. And certain political images was not indicted after the whole year. And what can the human rights international body do about this if, let's say a state implements certain national security in this area? That's number one question is, moving forward for the next generations, I see the changing of the guard in Cambodia, in other places in Southeast Asia. Will the new generations, carry on these kind of crime moving forward, or would there be any future for the region moving forward? Thank you very much.
Just to make sure I understood, the first question was, what can the international system do to address countries that are violating essentially people's rights through the imperative of security, of national security? Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
It's a very hard question, of course, and it's not just something that we see being used in this region, of course. I think since the whole move on counterterrorism began across the globe, we have increasingly seen the cover of national security being used to derogate, essentially, or move away from the obligations that are required of states under international law. And that imperative can be sometimes quite difficult for us to argue against. However, I think that this is where it comes down to both the international community. It comes to, as Ankana said, national human rights commissions and other bodies that are expected, whether they be regional, national, or international, to uphold human rights, is to really to get to the bottom of what is actually happening in any given country that is allowing for states to have these violations take place despite their obligations. I really, I have to say, I've been 21 years with the UN in different parts of the system. I came to work for the UN because I firmly believe that first, there is no other body that is mandated in this same way to uphold principles, values, and rights that are not just Western, but that are for all. But we have extremely limited capacity, sadly, and it's something that we who work in the UN bump up against regularly when it comes to national sovereignty. And this gets to the point of how much can really be done when the imperative of national security is used. But it is just something that we must continue to expose, that indeed this is being misused, just as we saw during COVID. So many of the emergency regulations that were put in place, both in this region but in other parts of the world, were indeed being used to silence people, to curtail freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly. And we must continue to speak out against that in all of our various capacities. I'll stop. Thank you. It's not an answer, I know. It's woefully short of an answer, but it's the best really I can do.
Thank you. Please go right ahead. Yep, going back to the mic. Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Ted Mayer. I'm with the International Network of Engaged Buddhists and the School of English for Engaged Social Service. I had the honor of being one of the editors for Shui-Ming. And I want to thank you, Shui-Ming, for that, along with my colleague, Melissa Storms. And so I want to actually make a comment, and I welcome your response too. But so as an editor, you're always thinking, well, there are those moments where you're thinking, what is being said here? And is it coming through clearly, you know? And I think let me just share something real briefly, that when I was an undergraduate, my father died. And a very beloved professor said to me, he looked straight at me and he said, Ted, you know, your relationship with your dad will continue to grow. Your relationship goes on and it will continue to grow. And I just thought about this just now because both you, Kun Ankana, and Shui-Ming have emphasized the ambiguity that is there. So I'm thinking that in that situation of someone who has been forcibly disappeared, that your relationship goes on and it continues to grow. And what I want to say here is that as a reader, if you haven't read the book yet, Shui-Ming's book, I think you will see a person who is working through their relationship with someone, and that person is of international significance. You know, so that, and I really appreciate that dimension of your book, Shui-Ming, that, and I welcome your response, but I feel that you are also, you know, relationships have many dimensions, very ordinary, mundane kind of things, very tremendous things, you know, but at the same time that you're talking about someone you knew well, and through the book you learn about Laos, you learn about the whole phenomenon of enforced disappearances, but you also learn about this person who's working through a relationship. So I just want to recommend the book in that sense, and also thank you for your honesty and your courage in speaking up. You know, Nadia Murad, who was one of the co-winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, who was a sex slave of ISIS, she said, you know, my one power is to speak up. And I really appreciate what various people have said. I think it's not just Laos. I think all of Southeast Asia, not only Southeast Asia, but, you know, I'm an American and I see it there, but is this, but especially in Southeast Asia, I think this feeling of it's too scary to speak up, but also it's sort of not right, it's not polite, and so on. And so I really appreciate your courage in speaking up, both of you, Kun Ankana and Shui-Ming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Would you like to comment back on that?
Ted, you're right. Writing the book, it's a way of continue our relationship, my relationship with Sombath, and to get to know him, facets of him which probably I didn't notice, or, you know, you kind of don't really pay attention to, comes back, and then you kind of wonder, okay, why did he do that? Why did he say this? So it's not emotionally easy, but at the same time, it's also comforting. And I often also regret oh, if only I have had more chance to have talked to Sombath about this or that, and to hear what he would have said. So, in some sense, he's always with me. This conversation, this relationship continues, and that is perhaps the comforting part of writing the book, the comforting part of exploring or exposing facets of our lives. Of course, any book is only a sliver and also selected memories, but it allows me to go on and continue.
I would like to share that I think one important thing is for the families. One thing, most of the families, we afraid that one day we might forget our loved one. And you know that in reality, from my experiences, not only in Thailand and many countries, the victims of the disappear might be created to the new recognition as the bad people. For example, some of them might be involved with the terrorists, the bandit lawyer, the drug offenses, or whatever. So this is what the families have to face. For myself, you know, you can imagine that how all my children can go to school when in the front page of the newspaper and in the television, the father was called a bandit lawyer. So that's why we try to keep our memories. One thing I often told my children is that nobody knows your fathers, so you have to show to our society what your father is, if he's still alive, what he do for his people, how he helps the poor people, how he works, how he have a good relationship with all the stakeholders. I think this is one thing that a lot of families want to keep the memories. A lot of victims in Thailand, especially the children, they wrote the letter. It's called the letter with no recipient. They wrote the letter to their fathers, to their brothers, or to their son, and they often wrote it. It's like to remind them that their loved ones still be somewhere. And as I mentioned earlier, that for the victims, you know, it's like ambiguity, and it makes us very confused between alive or dead. We don't know. I used to face that emotion, and it's make the children, it make the family, especially the children, are very confusing what has happened, because I think that most of the government try to make us in confusion. Because you know that one day somebody came to your house and said your father is still alive, and the next day you heard another story. So the emotion is up and down, always. So that what we're trying to do is that we try to document our memories, and I think that these memories will always tell us the stories of our loved one wherever they are, but they're still with us. I think this one thing that is the way for healing and and it helped us to hearing ourselves. I think when you wrote something to the loved one every day, every week, or every month, and it will be a history that written by the victims. I think is very important.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Lehman, and I'm retired here in Bangkok. This is just a comment. I first met Sombath in 1970 when he was a student at the lycée in Vientiane. And to see a photo of him in the book a few minutes ago at that age is rather painful. I would just like to thank you for completing the book. I know it was a struggle. There's a common belief, I think, in Thailand as well as Laos, that we don't talk about something, it never happened. And this book will make forgetting what has happened painful. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? If not, let me thank you all for coming. Let me also note again that there are copies of the book for sale in the back. That Shui-Ming will be here, so you can come and have her sign the book and share your thoughts with her directly if you'd like. I want to thank everyone who was involved in organizing this. I want to thank all the people who were involved in helping with the production of the book. And on behalf of all the families of victims of enforced disappearances, recognize that we're not going to give up. We're going to continue to fight forward, and we're going to find out what happened. We're going to find out where is Sombath. So thank you again.
One last thing, I just want to let everybody know, the proceeds from the sale of the book will go to the Sombath Education Fund, because education is his passion. So whatever proceeds from this book will go to that fund. Thank you.